Before we dive into this darkness, do yourself a favor, hit subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments what you think really happened inside Borgo Prison. Because once you hear this story, you won't look at prison walls the same way again. The sirens began at the 13 a.m. Residents in the quiet district outside Borgo Prison woke to a sound that didn't belong in their peaceful Roman neighborhood. Patrol cars tore down the narrow streets, blue lights bouncing off ancient stone buildings. An ambulance followed, then another. Inside Borgo Prison, a century-old correctional facility known for its strict discipline and controversial punishment methods, Block C had gone into full lockdown. By sunrise, one inmate was dead. His name was Matteo Rizzi, 34 years old. Convicted of armed robbery, serving 8 years. No history of gang affiliation. No violent infractions inside. By all accounts, he kept his head down. Yet he was found unresponsive in a solitary confinement cell, what the prison officially called Administrative Separation Unit 3. The prison administration released a short statement before noon. Inmate Matteo Rizzi was found deceased in his cell. An internal investigation is underway. There is no ongoing threat to public safety, but the phrasing bothered Inspector Elena Moretti the moment she read it. No ongoing threat, she repeated quietly, standing outside the iron gates as journalists shouted questions behind her. Elena had investigated homicides across Rome for 15 years, domestic killings, organized crime, even corruption cases involving officials who thought they were untouchable. But deaths inside Borgo Prison were rare and rarely simple. When she stepped inside, the air felt different, heavy, controlled, the kind of silence that suggested everyone knew something but no one wanted to speak. Warden Carlo Vitali met her near the entrance of Block C, late 50s. Immaculate uniform, measured voice. It appears to be self-harm, Vitali said calmly. Mr. Rizzi had been placed in separation following disciplinary infractions. What kind of infractions? Elena asked. Vitali hesitated half a second too long. Insubordination. Refusal to comply with correctional staff. Violent. No. They walked down the corridor toward Unit 3. Security cameras lined the ceiling. Every movement inside Borgo was recorded, or at least, that was the claim. Matteo's cell was small, concrete bed, stainless steel toilet, no personal belongings. The overhead light buzzed faintly. Forensics had already removed the body. But Elena noticed something immediately. The walls, faint scratch marks covered the concrete beside the bed. Not random, not chaotic. They formed lines, patterns. She stepped closer. Were these documented? She asked. Vitali frowned. Likely stress markings. Inmates in isolation often behave erratically. Elena crouched near the wall. The scratches weren't wild. They were deliberate. 3 vertical lines. A pause, 3 more, then another grouping of 3. 3, 3, 3. A rhythm. Inspector, Vitali said firmly, Borgo operates under strict international standards. Our disciplinary measures are legal and monitored. She stood slowly. Then I'm sure you won't mind if I review the surveillance footage. By mid-afternoon, Elena sat in a dim control room reviewing camera feeds from the past 72 hours. At 8:47 p.m., 2 nights earlier, Matteo had been escorted into Administrative Separation Unit 3 by 2 guards, Luca Greco and Tomas Bianchi. Matteo didn't resist. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't fighting. He looked scared. Pause it, Elena said. She leaned closer to the screen. As Greco unlocked the cell, Bianchi leaned in and whispered something into Matteo's ear. The audio feed was muted, standard policy. But Matteo's reaction wasn't subtle. His face drained of color, his shoulders tensed. What did he say? Elena asked. The technician shook his head. No audio in isolation corridors. Convenient, she fast-forwarded. 10:15 p.m. Lights off. 11:02 p.m. A shadow passed the camera, someone standing just outside the cell door. 11:03 p.m. The camera feed glitched, static, for 12 seconds. When the footage resumed, the corridor was empty. We've had minor outages before, only in this corridor. Silence, she requested personnel files for Greco and Bianchi. Greco had been at Borgo for 12 years, clean record. Commendations for discipline enforcement. Bianchi was newer, for years. To complaints filed by inmates alleging excessive force. Both dismissed for insufficient evidence. Elena called them in separately. Greco sat straight-backed, hands folded. Matteo Rizzi was disruptive, he said evenly. Refused direct orders. We placed him in separation for 24 hours. Why was he still there 48 hours later? Extended review. Who authorized it? The disciplinary committee. Names. He hesitated. Bianchi was different. Sweating. Avoiding eye contact. He was agitated, Bianchi said. Kept saying he needed to talk to someone. About what? I don't know. You leaned into his ear before locking him in. What did you say? Bianchi's jaw tightened. I told him to calm down. Are you sure? Yes, because from where I'm sitting, Elena said quietly, it looked like you threatened him. His eyes flickered. For a second, just a second, fear replaced defensiveness. By evening, Elena received the preliminary autopsy report. Cause of death, asphyxiation, ligature marks consistent with hanging. But there was a detail buried halfway through the document. Bruising on the wrists, bilateral, recent, not consistent with self-restraint. Consistent with restraint by another individual. Elena leaned back in her chair. If Matteo had been restrained, then someone else had been inside that cell after lockdown. Which meant the camera glitch wasn't random, it was timed. She requested maintenance logs for the surveillance system. One entry stood out. 11 o'clock p.m. Routine recalibration. Authorized by Warden C. Vitali. Elena stared at the screen. The recalibration occurred exactly 2 minutes before the footage cut out. She closed the file slowly. At 9:32 p.m., her phone buzzed. A known number, she answered. A distorted voice whispered, "You're looking in the wrong place. Who is this?" A pause. "Punishment isn't what kills them," the voice said. "It's discipline." The line went dead. Elena froze. Punishment isn't what kills them. It's discipline. She thought about the scratch marks on the wall. The deliberate rhythm. 3, 3, 3. What if they weren't stress marks? What if they were counting? Counting something that happened every night at the same time. Her eyes drifted back to the footage timestamp. 11:03 p.m. Every night. She requested logs of all inmates placed in Administrative Separation Unit 3 over the past 5 years. When the list arrived, her pulse quickened. 6 inmates. All isolated for disciplinary reasons. All died within 72 hours of placement. All ruled self-inflicted. Elena whispered to herself, "That's not coincidence." She zoomed into the final entry on the list. One name stopped her cold. Inmate number 4421, died 3 years ago. Official cause, suicide. Next of kin, Matteo Rizzi, brother. The room felt smaller. Matteo hadn't been disruptive, he had been digging. And when they opened the archived disciplinary file connected to his brother's death, what they found changed
Chapter
everything.
2. The discipline protocol archived file was thinner than Elena expected. For a death inside a maximum security facility, the documentation was disturbingly minimal: 3 pages of incident summary, a medical examiner's report, and a signed approval from Warden Carlo Vitali closing the case, self-inflicted. Inmate number 4421, Davide Rizzi, age 29, convicted of fraud, no prior violent history. Placed in Administrative Separation, Unit 3 for repeated defiance and disruptive conduct. 48 hours later, found dead. Elena stared at the attached photo of Davide. The resemblance to Matteo was undeniable, same dark eyes, same narrow jawline. But Davide's intake image showed something else: bruising near the temple. The medical report called it accidental contact with cell structure. Elena closed the folder and stowed. If Matteo had been asking questions about his brother's death, and if 6 inmates had died in the same isolation cell under similar circumstances, then Borgo Prison wasn't dealing with random tragedies. It was running a system. By noon, Elena requested access to the internal disciplinary committee records. The request was denied. Confidential institutional material, the official reply read. She wasn't surprised. What did surprise her was how quickly the resistance came. 2 plainclothes officers from internal oversight arrived at her office within hours. "This case is sensitive," one of them said carefully. "The ministry prefers handled discreetly. Elena Moretti has handled sensitive cases before," she replied calmly. 6 dead inmates isn't discreet, it's a pattern. The men exchanged a look. "Be cautious," the other officer said. "Borgo has political friends." That wasn't a warning. It was a threat disguised as advice. Elena returned to Borgo Prison unannounced that evening. This time, She asked to speak to inmates currently housed near Unit 3. Most refused. Fear hung in the air like smoke, but one inmate agreed. His name was Andrei Kovac, 42, serving 12 years for armed burglary. Scar across his cheek, eyes too alert to miss anything. He sat across from her in the visitation room, wrists cuffed to the table. "You're investigating Matteo," Andrei said quietly. "Yes. You won't get truth from guards." "Then tell me yours." He leaned back slightly. "They call it discipline," he said. "But it's something else," explain. "In Borgo, punishment is official. Written up, logged, but discipline, that's off record." Elena kept her voice steady. "What happens during discipline?" Andrei hesitated. "You disappear." "Disappear where?" He glanced toward the ceiling camera. "Unit 3. What happens inside Unit 3 at 11 o'clock? Andrei's jaw tightened. "You hear footsteps, the lights flicker. The corridor goes quiet, and then someone goes in. Who? We don't see faces, just shadows under the door." Elena leaned closer. And sometimes, you hear something, not screaming." "Not exactly. What do you hear?" He swallowed, breathing. "Like someone trying to stay conscious." Silence filled the room. "And the next morning?" Elena asked. Andrei looked at her directly. "They say he couldn't handle isolation." Elena left Borgo with a recording of Andrei's statement. But she knew testimony alone wouldn't break this open. She needed proof. She returned to the surveillance room and demanded full access to archived footage from the previous inmate deaths. The technician hesitated. "Authorization comes from me," she said sharply. Hours passed as she reviewed timestamps. Every single death followed the same pattern. Isolation placement, minimal interaction. Then, at precisely 11:03 p.m., a brief camera disruption in corridor C. 12 seconds, every time. Her heart pounded. "This isn't malfunction," she murmured. "It's synchronization." She requested maintenance records again. The recalibration authorization code traced back to a restricted administrator profile. Not just the warden, someone with higher clearance. At 8:15 p.m., Elena received another call from an unknown number. "You're getting close," the distorted voice said. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Look deeper into the committee names." A pause. "Greco doesn't act alone." The line went dead. Elena immediately pulled committee rosters for the past 5 years. 3 consistent names appeared on every disciplinary approval tied to Unit 3. Warden Carlo Vitali, Chief Guard Luca Greco, and Deputy Director Marco Sorrentino. Sorrentino. Elena frowned. Marco Sorrentino wasn't just a prison official. He was a former military intelligence officer transferred to corrections 6 years ago, the same year the first Unit 3 death occurred. She dug further. Sorrentino had authored a document titled Enhanced Behavioral Compliance Protocol, internal distribution only. She accessed it through a secure database after hours of bypassing administrative blocks. The document chilled her. It described a method designed to accelerate psychological compliance in resistant inmates through controlled environmental stressors, sleep disruption, light manipulation, physical restraint under medical observation, and a section labeled Intensive Discipline Cycle to 180 seconds, 3 minutes, 3, 3, 3. Elena's breath caught. 3-minute intervals, repeated. That's what Matteo had scratched into the wall, not random lines, time markers. He had been counting the cycles, 3 minutes of something. Repeated until her phone rang again. This time, it was a number she recognized. "Forensic lab, we re-examined the ligature marks," the technician said. "There's something you should know. Go on. The angle is wrong." "Wrong how?" "If he had hanged himself, the marks would be upward and diagonal. These are horizontal." Elena closed her eyes. So someone applied force from behind." Her pulse roared in her ears. Matteo hadn't taken his own life. He'd been held down, disciplined. The next morning, Elena returned to Borgo with a warrant. Warden Vitali met her at the gate, but his conficate had cracks now. "This is unnecessary," he said tightly. "What's unnecessary?" Elena replied. "Is 6 men dying under identical circumstances?" She demanded access to Unit 3 immediately. Inside, she examined the ceiling vent above Matteo's forward bed. There was no structural point strong enough to support hanging weight. The official explanation physically didn't make sense. She then requested keycard access logs for 11 o'clock p.m. The night Matteo died. The records had been wiped, not corrupted, deleted. Who has clearance to delete logs? She asked. The tally remained silent. Elena turned toward the guard station. Seal the corridor, she ordered her team, and that's when chaos erupted. A guard ran down the hallway shouting, "Sorrentino is gone." What? Elena snapped. He didn't report this morning. His office is cleared out. Her stomach dropped. Vehicle missing. Elena rushed toward the administrative wing. Sorrentino's office drawers were empty. Computer hard drive removed, paper files shredded. But inside the desk's hidden lower compartment, they found something he'd missed. A flash drive. Elena stared at it for a long moment before plugging it into a secure laptop. The screen filled with video files, each labeled by inmate number. Each time-stamped at 11:03 p.m. She opened one. The camera angle wasn't from the corridor. It was from inside the cell. The footage showed two masked figures entering. One restraining the inmate, the other standing over him with a stopwatch. 3 minutes, the inmate gasping. 3 minutes, no strikes, no visible weapons. Just controlled suffocation stopping short of death, conditioning, discipline, until one night, something went too far. Elena's hands trembled as she opened the final file. Inmate, Matteo Rizzi. The footage loaded, and what she saw made her blood run cold.
The footage began at 11:02 p.m. Matteo Rizzi sat on the edge of the narrow metal bed inside Unit 3. His hands trembled, but his face was steady. The overhead light flickered once, twice, then steadied into a harsh white glare. At 11:03 p.m., the cell door opened. Two masked figures stepped inside. Elena froze the frame and zoomed in. The image was grainy, but one detail stood out immediately: the posture of the taller figure. Military straight, shoulders squared. Movements precise, economical. Marco Sorrentino. The second man, shorter, heavier build, moved with familiarity in the confined space. He didn't hesitate. Luca Greco. The door shut behind them. Matteo stood slowly. He didn't resist. He knew the routine. Sorrentino raised a small digital stopwatch. The red numbers blinked to life. 0 o'clock. Greco stepped forward and forced Matteo down onto the bed. No punches, no rage, just procedure. Sorrentino nodded. Greco wrapped one forearm across Matteo's throat, not crushing, but tight enough to restrict airflow. His other hand pinned Matteo's wrist. 0:34. Matteo's chest heaved. He tried to twist free, but the grip tightened. Elena felt her jaw clench. This wasn't discipline. It was calibrated suffocation. 1:17. Matteo's movements weakened. His legs kicked once against the metal frame. Sorrentino watched the stopwatch. 1:59. Greco eased the pressure slightly. Matteo gasped. Sorrentino raised a finger. Again, he mouthed. 2:03. The hold tightened once more. 3 minutes, exactly. 3 o'clock. Sorrentino tapped the stopwatch. Greco released him. Matteo collapsed sideways, coughing violently, struggling to pull air back into his lungs. The men stood over him, observing, studying. The file ended there. Elena swallowed hard and opened the next clip. Same night. 11:10 p.m. The door opened again. Matteo was still on the floor, breathing shallowly. Sorrentino stepped closer this time, crouching in front of him. He spoke, though the audio was faint. Elena adjusted the volume. "You will comply." Matteo shook his head weakly. Sorrentino looked at Greco. The stopwatch reset. 0 o'clock. This time the hold was lower, compressing both airway and carotid arteries. 1:45. Matteo's body convulsed once.